Good to be with you again. I hope many of you had the opportunity some time in the past to see the movie A Man for All Seasons, the life of St. Thomas More, whom we celebrate on June the 22nd, along with Bishop John Fisher. Thomas More was a great personality of his time. He became very interested in the rebirth of knowledge, what we call the Renaissance. He was a great friend of King Henry VIII, and as a lawyer, wound up being appointed Chancellor of England, the most important post next to the king himself. And he worked so closely with King Henry for many years, a good friend, counselor. And yet when it came to King Henry VIII wanting his divorce from his wife Catherine, and the Catholic Church refusing to give that divorce, and he began to put pressure on other people in the realm of England, Thomas More would not violate his conscience. He didn't want to become a martyr. He used a lot of legalistic steps to try to avoid things, but whenever it came right down to it, now, he was willing to be put in the Tower of London for a time and finally to be beheaded in 1535. John Fisher was a bishop of England, again, very interested and dedicated to the rebirth of knowledge in the Renaissance, a real scholar. He was made the bishop of the city of Rochester, which is a short distance from London to the southeast. And he too resisted the king's efforts to take over the church in England. And finally, he too was beheaded at the age of 67. The oldest bishop at the time in England, the only one to refuse to go along with the king's proposals to take over the whole church. Both of them stand as models for our own time because they were men who refused to compromise their convictions and conscience. Bishop John Fisher, in fact, was made a cardinal while he was imprisoned in the Tower of London, the Pope trying to demonstrate his support for these local English heroes resisting the king. Cardinal Wright of the United States is often called St. Thomas More, one of the greatest leaders of the Renaissance. I've always admired, especially St. Thomas More, a layman. He was married twice, his first wife dying, and he fathered a son and 3 daughters, a family man, and yet unwilling to surrender his principles, even for the king, his dear friend. Some years ago, our own Bishop Saltarelli even created a litany of the saints for Thomas More as we pray for political figures in our own time. Indeed, it may seem almost ironic that we're celebrating a politician who was a saint. And yes, St. Thomas More gives us that example. In our own time, in America, we are experiencing at times a government that is seeking to force us to violate our own conscience. Recently, the Supreme Court ruled that the city of Philadelphia could not force Catholic Charities in Philadelphia to abandon its conscience rights and allow the adoption of children by those who were not married in a proper way, the homosexuals. Our own government still is apparently intent on trying to force all Catholic hospitals and doctors to perform abortions against their conscience, and even to perform the surgeries by which people change their gender. It's incredible that a government which is supposed to be dedicated to our fundamental rights as Americans would still attempt to force people to violate their conscience. Not only Catholics, many Protestants, especially of fundamentalist convictions, many Orthodox Jews, certainly all Muslims agree with us on these moral principles. So it's a time when we need the example of these martyrs to give us strength in our own time, that we stand by our convictions, that we do not violate our conscience. We pray for the leaders of our nation that they will come to recognize the importance of respecting our freedom of religion, to practice our faith, to respect our conscience. We pray for the leaders of our nation that they will cease these efforts to try to force people to violate conscience and do things that we believe are morally wrong. God bless you, our nation, and all your loved ones.